that you would be able to use for proofing, would those be bilingual as well?
I don't think the reports are bilingual. I'd have to double check on that if you can, because you can proof the translations in the translation window. So if you needed to proof that. And then of course the bilingual ballot proof is bilingual, but the actual data set reports I do not believe are bilingual.
In the translations, there's a report that you'd be able to print out, or that would just be on screen?
Let me go back and check. I need to turn it on real quick. Well, actually, I'm looking at it the wrong way. I can export my translations right there. That's the way I would do it. I have to talk it out. The other report that I'll show to answer your question over here is the jurisdiction configuration report. It does show, that first one's not that great, but all of the districts. So this is my jurisdiction-wide district and the precincts associated, and my US rep in this case and the precincts associated. Obviously yours are going to be a little bigger, but it's all there and you can proof that data. And again, once you proof that association once, you're good to go. So there is a final step where we lock down the election, but we can do in our very next release that is coming out, versioning. So if you did lock something down and then realize that you made a mistake, you could go back and make some corrections. We also have aliasing in our tabulation software. So if a mistake did make it all the way out to the public, you could fix a candidate name misspelling, or if a candidate needed to drop out or was deceased or something like that, you could alias that, change it on the reports going forward on the back. But there is a point where we need to say, this is the ballot, we've proofed it, it's correct as best we know to this point, and then we'll validate it one more time and lock it down. And then we go into build, and build picks up where it left off. So again, that was quick and high level. We would do a much more extensive training, but any questions about just basic setup, how to create a ballot? It's really, our approach is if you understand elections here in the county, if you know the precincts, districts, contests, all that kind of stuff, anybody can sit down in front of this software. And I think I mentioned to some of you in the in-between or during the hands-on session, we actually went through an exercise when Oakland County, which is right outside of Detroit, was selecting us. They brought in the 3 vendors, and they said, do not train anyone, do not give us anything. We want to sit down in front of it, worst case scenario, build our, because this was in January 2017, after the presidential election. They built their 2016 presidential, and it took them about half a day in a pretty large county. So, and that was from scratch. So, we're pretty proud about the ease of use there. So Verity Build is much less in-depth. You've already created the ballot essentially at this point, but this is where you're going to deploy it. And we've separated this out very intentionally because there are some of our customers and some of our counties that want us to do the ballot creation, and then we hand it off to them, and they can still proof it, they can preview it, and they can look at all their reports and proof the audio and check our work essentially. But then they still have the ability to write their VDREVs, write their keys, print their ballots, and do all that kind of stuff in-house. So you've already done all this stuff with the previewing and the proofing. So you would jump into the configuration settings. And this is where you can do things like, and I don't remember I had turned this off for today, but this is where you say, I want to make these ballots unique with that unique identifier in the barcode. Do you call a sample ballot a sample ballot? Do you call an official ballot an official ballot? Or do you want to give it some other kind of naming? Then the voting type setup. This is for the 3 buckets that we had. You can then decide, so at the end of the day, on election day, at your scanner, do you want to allow a tally tape, a results tape to print out, yes or no? And what time, what is the end date and time? And then for something like for in-person voting, every day you would want to suspend the polls. And you can also do what's called both. So for your in-person voting, if you knew that the date range was 2 weeks before the election, but the final day of in-person voting was the Saturday or the Friday before, you can set that date so that every day leading up to that you're suspending, but on that date you're actually closing the polls and it's secured and they're locked down and can't be moved. This is where you're saying, do I want a precinct level or a summary report out of my devices? This is really just setting the behavior of the devices in the polling location, and then the device passcodes. So this is where today I was making everything 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but obviously you would be better with the passwords for poll worker, maintenance, administrator, and then open and close or open and suspend process. We also mentioned the defaults of how the scan will react to voter intent issues, overvotes, undervotes, things like that. Those can be set in here as well. So right now, I was allowing undervotes, which is what we see most people do, because people skip contests all the time. You wouldn't want every undervoter race to be returned to the voter. But of course, for overs, a blank ballot, it would reject those, and the voter overrides the reject. You could set it up to where every overvoted contest that comes back, a poll worker is required to accept that ballot. But we're mostly seeing voter override as the norm. This invalid vote, I don't think would apply to you. That's for states that do what's called pick-a-party primaries, where basically there's different columns for the different parties and you have to stay in your lane, and if you were to cross into multiple parties, that would be considered an invalid vote. So in those places, it would alert you to that. I think it's funny wording, because I think a lot of votes, if you're calling something an invalid vote, that doesn't sound. But once you basically set all of these things, the passcodes, the device behavior, end date and times, then you're ready to create the 3 things you need, like I said, that make up the election. So we're printing ballots. This is where I can select the precinct. I can print it directly to my connected printer. I can export it to PDF. I can also import a plain print queue file, which will print the quantities by precinct that I need, or a pre-marked test edit file, which would do that pre-marked test edit for me. But yeah, I can do an official test or sample ballots as well. Then in V drives, this is where I can do official or test mode V drives. All of the V drives for an election are identical, so you don't have to say, this is the V drive for this polling place and make sure it gets into the right device. You're just saying, I need quantity 500 or whatever it is, and then you grab any V drive out of the bucket and put it into any of our devices, or take it to the very central software for high-speed scanning.
Wait, say that again?
So all of the V drives are identical, so you're just setting the quantity that you need. So for example, if you've got, well, how many polling places do you have?
Like 400.
400. So in that scenario, if you follow our model of having 1 scanner in the polling place and 1 ADA device, you need to make 800 V drives to satisfy that requirement. But all 800 of those V drives are identical when they come out of the system. And then as you're in your warehouse staff just needs to grab any V drive out of the box, plug it into the device, and then the device says, this is a new election, do you want me to load it? Yes, and then it says, what polling place am I going to? And when you assign it to that polling place, that's when it whittles down to say, oh, I know I'm the Civic Center polling place and I'm only accepting precinct 101 ballots. Or I know I'm the early voting or in-person voting place and I'm accepting every ballot. And then the keys, again, the key is new for every election. It's like changing the locks on the door for every single election, makes it more secure. And the key goes with the V drive when you're loading it onto the device, but the key is removed and the V drive is delivered under lock and seal out to the polling place. And I think I mentioned to some of you during the hands-on time, there's 2 ports inside every device. The V drive and the key can plug into either port. It's not a specific port. And the top locking lid and compartment will not close if the key is still inserted. So you won't accidentally send your keys out to the polling location. But that's it for build. That's, build is kind of the workhorse where you're setting the device behaviors and producing the things you need. Are there any questions?
This is just for my folks here. So have we been successful to get the entire election on 1 stick?
It depends on how much is in the election.
So,
Like a residential primary, no.
so how big,
Well, you said you're using 8 gig sticks, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
that might get it done? 'Cause we're
You might
working-
get the problem is really with the system we use now is at the DS200 itself.
So it's not the actual?
It's not the actual
Okay.
stick. It's the DS200 only has a certain amount of RAM we can use and we exceed that a certain amount.
Yeah, and I can send you our system limits for number of precincts and
Mhm.
ballot styles and things like that. I mean, I know you're a very large county, but I'm pretty confident that we're gonna be beyond the limits of what you do, because we work with some pretty big counties across the country. Any other questions? So those two applications, data and build, really encompass ballot creation and delivery. There's a whole lot of stuff that we would talk to you about. Warehouse procedures, what are you gonna do once you, the pre-definition process, essentially, of loading the election via the V drive onto those devices, and how that process works. But we feel like we've streamlined it, made it pretty easy for the warehouse staff. Is all of that done like in one centralized location and then delivered out?
Mhm.
Yeah. So we got one more application, and that's the tabulation and reporting. Are we still doing good on time? So, as the name implies, Verity Count, it's all about tabulation and reporting. It, again, follows the same kind of user interface as all the other applications. Very similar to the idea for poll workers, where when you learn one device, you know them all, because it's a common platform. We wanted our software to have that same look and